The young girl had always been drawn to the piano. The moment her fingers touched the keys, something inside her felt right. She loved the way music could change the air around her, how each note could carry a feeling or a story. But her journey with the piano was not easy. It began with a mix of excitement and fear, as she entered a small music classroom in her school for her first lesson. She was shy and quiet, always careful to stay in the background, hoping no one would notice her mistakes. Her teacher was known for being strict, someone who believed that only perfection was acceptable. He had sharp eyes that could spot the smallest error and a voice that could make anyone feel small if they faltered. On her first day, he looked at her over the rim of his glasses and asked her to play something simple. Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed the keys. The notes came out uneven, some too soft, some too loud, and she could feel her face turning red. Instead of encouragement, the teacher's lips pressed into a thin line. "Are you sure you've practiced at all?" he asked loudly, letting the words hang in the air for everyone to hear. The girl froze, unsure how to respond. She wanted to explain that she had practiced, that she had spent hours trying to make it perfect, but the words wouldn't come. She felt embarrassed, her small confidence shaken. Other students in the class glanced at her, some with sympathy, some with amusement. She wanted to shrink into her chair and disappear. But despite the humiliation, something inside her refused to give up. She loved the piano too much to let a single moment of embarrassment stop her. Quietly, she promised herself that she would return stronger and prove that she could play well. After class, she rushed home with a mix of anger and determination. She went straight to her own piano, the one in the corner of her room that had been there since she was very young. She sat down, lifted her hands over the keys, and began to play. This time, no one was watching. No one could judge her mistakes. She could take her time, correcting each note, practicing slowly and carefully. Hours passed without her noticing, her fingers moving across the keys, her heart sinking into every melody she played. Her parents noticed her determination. They had always supported her love for music, but seeing her so focused, so driven even after being embarrassed, made them proud. They encouraged her gently, reminding her that talent grows with patience and practice, and that even great musicians had moments of doubt. Their words were comforting, but she still felt a lingering fear about returning to class and facing the teacher again. The days that followed were filled with quiet struggle. Each time she went to class, she felt the weight of the teacher's gaze on her, as if he were waiting for her to fail again. She would play the pieces she had practiced at home, and though some notes were still shaky, there was progress. She learned to breathe deeply before starting, to steady her hands, and to focus on the music rather than the judgment around her. Despite the strictness of the teacher, she began to notice small moments of improvement. She could play longer pieces without stopping, she could reach the higher notes without straining, and she could feel the emotion of the music in a way that went beyond just pressing the keys. These small victories became her secret motivation, and slowly, the fear began to mix with excitement. She started to enjoy the challenge, finding joy in every tiny improvement. Her classmates began to notice her dedication as well. They saw her practicing during breaks, staying after school to perfect a piece, and quietly refusing to give up even when the teacher's words were harsh. Some of them started to cheer her on in small ways, offering smiles or quiet nods of encouragement. She was still shy, still nervous, but knowing that someone believed in her helped her take another step forward. One evening, while she was practicing a particularly difficult piece, she felt something click. Her fingers moved more confidently, the notes flowed more smoothly, and she could feel the melody shaping itself under her touch. It wasn't perfect, not yet, but it was a breakthrough. She realized that all the practice, all the moments of embarrassment, had led her to this point. The music wasn't just something she played, it was becoming a part of her. The next day at school, she walked into the music room with a sense of quiet determination. She could feel the teacher's eyes on her, sharp and critical, but she didn't let it shake her. When it was her turn to play, she took a deep breath and began. The notes came out more steadily than before. She made a few mistakes, but they were small, and she quickly recovered, letting the music flow naturally. For the first time, She felt that the classroom wasn't a place of judgment, but a stage for her growth. Even though the teacher remained stern, there was a hint of surprise in his expression. He didn't offer praise, not yet, but the way he listened, the way he watched her fingers move, suggested that he was noticing something new. She didn't need his approval to feel proud. The real reward was in the music itself, in the feeling that she could overcome fear and embarrassment through dedication. She left the classroom that day feeling a mix of relief and excitement. She knew the journey ahead would not be easy. There would be more challenging pieces, more moments of self-doubt, and perhaps more criticism from the teacher. But she also knew that she had discovered something powerful within herself. The ability to keep going, to learn from every mistake, and to let her love for the piano guide her. At home, she returned to her practice with renewed energy. She experimented with different styles, tried to play more expressively, and began to develop her own sense of musicality. Her parents watched, amazed at how focused and passionate she had become. They offered gentle guidance when needed, but mostly, they let her explore her own path, understanding that true mastery comes from within. Weeks passed, and her confidence grew slowly but steadily. She could see the progress in her fingers, in the way she could play pieces that once seemed impossible. Her fear of embarrassment began to fade, replaced by a quiet determination. She was learning not just about music, but about herself. That resilience and patience could turn even the harshest criticism into fuel for growth. The first part of her journey was not about applause or recognition. It was about learning to face fear, to practice with dedication, and to believe in herself even when others doubted her. It was about discovering that talent alone was not enough. It required effort, persistence, and courage. And though the teacher still challenged her, trying to test her limits, she was ready. She had found her inner strength, and she knew that this was only the beginning of a story that would surprise everyone. After the breakthrough in her first lesson, the young girl's life became a rhythm of practice, discovery, and quiet determination. She returned home each day with a mixture of exhaustion and excitement, her mind replaying every note she had played in class. Even though she had made progress, she knew she had a long way to go. Every mistake became a lesson, every melody a challenge to be met with patience and focus. She began to structure her practice in a way that made sense to her. Mornings were for scales, each note carefully counted and measured. She repeated them until her fingers could move without thought, until the motions felt as natural as breathing. Afternoons were for pieces she was learning in class, where she tried to replicate the teacher's instructions exactly, paying close attention to every detail. Evenings were for exploration, where she allowed herself to play freely, following her emotions, letting her fingers dance across the keys as her heart guided them. Her parents noticed the intensity of her dedication. They never pressured her, but they gave small reminders to rest, to eat properly, and to take care of herself. She appreciated this support, knowing that she was not alone in her journey. Sometimes, they would listen to her play, smiling quietly as they heard the improvement that had once seemed impossible. These moments were small but meaningful, reminding her that effort was being noticed, even if not everyone would voice it. The music classroom remained a place of tension. Her teacher still watched her with critical eyes, sometimes making remarks that could sting. "Not precise enough," he would say, or "you need to feel the rhythm more." At first, these comments hurt deeply. She would go home feeling frustrated, questioning her abilities. But over time, she learned to filter his words, to take only what was useful and let the rest slide. She realized that his criticism was not always meant to break her, but to push her to see where improvement was possible. During breaks at school, she could often be found near the piano, practicing quietly while other students chatted or played outside. Some classmates began to admire her persistence, though few would say it out loud. Occasionally, someone would approach and ask for a tip or to hear a piece she was working on. At first, she was shy and hesitant, but gradually she found confidence in sharing her music. When she played for others, it was not for praise, but to communicate the emotions she had poured into every note. One day, the teacher introduced a new, complex piece that had challenged many students before her. The notes were fast, the rhythms difficult, and the emotions demanded by the piece were intense. She felt a pang of fear, remembering the first moments when she had been embarrassed in class. But instead of avoiding the challenge, she accepted it as an opportunity to grow. She took the sheet music home and studied it carefully, breaking it down into sections, practicing slowly and methodically. At home, her room became a sanctuary of music. She practiced each phrase repeatedly, learning to listen to the tone, the timing, and the feeling behind each note. Sometimes she would stop and close her eyes, imagining an audience, imagining the story the music was trying to tell. Other times, she would struggle with a particular passage, her fingers stumbling over difficult sequences. Frustration would creep in, but she refused to give up. She reminded herself that mastery was built from persistence, not speed. Her parents sometimes peeked in and watched quietly, careful not to disturb her focus. They saw the concentration on her face, the way her hands moved over the keys, and the subtle expressions of emotion as she played. They understood that this was more than just learning a piece of music. It was shaping her character, teaching her patience, resilience, and self-discipline. As the weeks passed, she noticed subtle changes in herself. Her hands became more agile, her sense of rhythm more precise, and her understanding of music deeper. She started to anticipate difficult passages, preparing herself mentally before her fingers reached them. She could feel the melody flowing through her, no longer simply pressing keys, but expressing emotion, telling a story that was uniquely hers. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a bridge between her inner world and the outside world. Despite her growing skill, she could not ignore the occasional setback. There were days when her hands refused to cooperate, when the music sounded awkward and harsh. On such days, the memory of the teacher's critical words would resurface, threatening to shake her confidence. But each time, she reminded herself of how far she had come, of the long hours she had spent practicing and improving. She learned to be patient with herself, understanding that progress was not always linear. Her confidence slowly grew, but she remained humble. She knew that talent alone would not carry her. Only dedication and practice could. She began to take small risks in her playing, experimenting with dynamics, tempo, and expression. She discovered the power of silence between notes, the way a pause could enhance emotion, the way a softer touch could create intimacy. These discoveries excited her, making her practice sessions more creative and enjoyable. In class, the teacher began to notice her subtle improvements. He observed the way she tackled complex passages, the care she took in each phrase, and the emotion that began to shine through her playing. He would sometimes nod, a small gesture that spoke volumes. Though he remained strict, there was a hint of recognition in his eyes, a quiet acknowledgement of her hard work. This recognition did not make her complacent. Instead, it fueled her desire to continue growing. The young girl also learned the value of self-reflection. After each practice, she would think about what went well and what needed improvement. She kept a small notebook where she wrote observations, noting passages that were tricky, rhythms that needed attention, and ideas for expressing emotion more effectively. This habit helped her track her progress and gave her a sense of control over her learning. Outside of the classroom, she began to notice the way music affected others. When she played for her family, she could see emotions stirred in their eyes, smiles that spoke without words, and quiet moments of appreciation. This reinforced her belief in the power of music to communicate feelings that words could not. She realized that her goal was not only to impress the teacher or master the notes, but to touch others through her music. Slowly, the young girl's reputation began to shift. Peers who once doubted her dedication now watched with curiosity and sometimes admiration. She was no longer just a shy, nervous student. She had become someone who faced challenges head-on and worked tirelessly to improve. Yet she remained grounded, understanding that there was always more to learn and that every day brought new opportunities to grow. One day, during a particularly intense practice session, she felt a breakthrough. A piece she had struggled with for weeks finally flowed effortlessly under her fingers. She could play it from beginning to end without hesitation, capturing the emotions she had been working to convey. It was not perfection, but it was progress, a milestone that gave her both pride and motivation to continue. The journey was not just about the piano. It was shaping her character. She was learning patience, discipline, resilience, and the joy of achieving something through effort. Each challenge she faced, each criticism she endured, became a lesson in perseverance. She began to understand that success was not immediate, and that the true reward lay in the process of learning and growing. By the end of this part of her journey, she had developed a strong foundation of skill and confidence. She was still shy and cautious, but she was no longer defined by fear of embarrassment. She had discovered the satisfaction of hard work and the thrill of overcoming obstacles. The young girl had begun to transform from a nervous beginner into a determined, passionate musician, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. She realized that the path would not always be easy, that criticism and setbacks would continue, and that mastery was a lifelong pursuit. But with each practice, each note, and each melody, she became stronger, more expressive, and more confident in her abilities. And though the teacher still observed critically, she no longer feared his judgment. She had found her own voice through the piano, a voice that could tell her story and touch the hearts of those who listened. The day of the big challenge arrived, and the young girl felt a familiar mix of excitement and nervousness. Her teacher had announced that everyone would perform a particularly difficult piece, one that tested not only technical skill but also emotional expression. Many students were anxious, some even whispered about quitting, but she knew this was her chance to prove not only to the teacher but to herself how far she had come. She arrived early to the music room, her hands slightly trembling but her heart steady. She looked around at her classmates, some practicing quietly, some nervously pacing. The teacher stood at the front, clipboard in hand, his gaze sharp and expectant. When it was her turn, he called her name in a voice that held a subtle challenge, a test she could not ignore. Walking to the piano, she took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys. Memories of past practices and struggles ran through her mind. She remembered the first day she had been embarrassed, the hours she had spent alone in her room, the notes she had struggled to master, and the small victories she had achieved in secret. Every memory became a quiet encouragement, reminding her that she was prepared. The first notes came out smoothly, surprising even her. She had practiced this opening countless times, but hearing it now in front of the teacher and classmates filled her with a mix of nerves and exhilaration. She focused on the music, not on the eyes watching her. Slowly, confidence began to replace her anxiety. Her fingers moved with precision, flowing across the keys, translating the emotions she had learned to feel into sound. Halfway through the piece, she encountered a challenging passage. In the past, this section had caused her to stumble, but now she felt a calm determination. She had practiced slowly, repeatedly, and had learned to anticipate every note. Her fingers flew over the keys, guided by both muscle memory and emotion, and she passed the difficult section without error. A small smile crept onto her face, and for the first time, she allowed herself to enjoy the music rather than fear it. Her classmates watched in silence, some leaning forward as if they could not believe their eyes. The teacher's expression shifted. His critical gaze softened for a moment as he listened intently. She could feel the intensity of the room, the weight of expectations, but instead of being intimidated, she used it to focus more deeply, letting every note resonate with clarity and emotion as the piece progressed. She began to feel the music flow through her completely. Each phrase carried meaning, each pause added tension, each crescendo heightened emotion. She realized that the piano was no longer just keys under her fingers. It was a vessel for expression, a way to communicate thoughts and feelings that words could never capture. This understanding made her performance more powerful, more alive. The final notes approached, and she played them with care, savoring the moment. When the last note lingered in the air, there was a brief pause, and then the room erupted in applause. She looked up, her heart pounding, and saw the teacher's eyes wide with surprise. He did not speak immediately, but the way he stood, slightly leaning forward, suggested recognition of her talent and hard work. She felt a rush of pride, not because of the applause, but because she had overcome fear and doubt and had allowed herself to shine. After the performance, the teacher finally spoke. His words were measured but carried weight. "You have improved significantly," he said, his tone neutral but not dismissive. "You are learning to play not just with skill, but with feeling. Keep this up." The young girl nodded, feeling a sense of validation, but she knew the journey was not over. There were still pieces to master, challenges to face, and new techniques to learn. This moment was important, but it was part of a larger journey. Her classmates approached her afterward, offering congratulations and admiration. Some expressed surprise, admitting that they had underestimated her abilities. She smiled quietly, grateful for the support, but remained humble. She understood that recognition was secondary to the personal growth she had achieved. The real victory was in the confidence and skill she had developed through persistent effort. That evening, she returned home, her mind replaying the performance over and over. She could still feel the nerves, the anticipation, and the thrill of overcoming the challenge. She sat at her home piano and began to play again, not to practice for perfection, but to relive the joy of expressing herself through music. Each note felt lighter, more fluid, and more connected to her emotions than ever before. Her parents noticed the change in her. She moved with more assurance, her fingers more confident, and her demeanor calmer yet more focused. They listened silently as she played, understanding that she had crossed an important threshold in her development as a musician. It was not just technical skill she had gained, but a sense of self-belief and resilience that would carry her through future challenges. Over the next few days, she reflected on the experience. She realized that the fear and embarrassment she had once felt were now part of her growth. She had learned to face challenges directly, to turn criticism into motivation, and to trust in her preparation and practice. Each performance was no longer just a test of skill but an opportunity to explore expression and emotion. She also began to notice subtle shifts in her relationship with the teacher. Though he remained strict, there was a new level of respect in his interactions. He asked her to demonstrate techniques to classmates, allowed her small freedoms in interpreting music, and provided guidance in ways that encouraged exploration rather than fear. This shift reinforced her belief that persistence and hard work could change not only skill but perception. Her practice routine evolved as well. She incorporated exercises that challenged her dexterity, creativity, and emotional expression. She experimented with improvisation, attempting to convey stories through music without relying on written notes. These experiments were difficult, sometimes frustrating, but each attempt strengthened her understanding of music and her confidence in expressing herself. Outside the classroom, her reputation grew slowly but steadily. Students who once doubted her now approached her for advice or to listen to her play. Teachers from other classes noticed her dedication and skill, occasionally stopping to observe her practice or comment on her progress. She remained humble, understanding that admiration was not the goal, but rather a byproduct of consistent effort and passion. In addition to technical skill, she began to understand the emotional power of music. She learned how to convey feelings of joy, sadness, tension, and resolution through subtle variations in tempo, touch, and phrasing. Each practice session became an exploration, a chance to connect more deeply with the music and to discover how it could touch others. The young girl's journey was no longer just about overcoming fear. It was about embracing the full experience of being a musician. She had learned patience, discipline, and the courage to face challenges head-on. She had discovered that mistakes were opportunities for growth, that criticism could be valuable when used constructively, and that persistence was the key to transformation. Her confidence was growing, but she remained aware of the work that lay ahead. She knew that mastery was a lifelong pursuit and that each new piece would bring its own challenges. Yet, she approached each day with enthusiasm, eager to learn, improve, and explore the depths of musical expression. She had learned to trust herself, to believe in her abilities, and to let her passion guide her through every difficulty. By the end of this part of her journey, she had transformed in ways that went beyond technical skill. She had faced her fears, met challenges with determination, and discovered a deeper connection to the music she loved. Her performance had not only shocked those who doubted her, but had also given her a profound sense of self-assurance. The young girl was no longer defined by embarrassment or fear. She was defined by her dedication, resilience, and the joy she found in music. As she continued to play, she felt a growing sense of excitement for the future. She knew that there would be more obstacles, more moments of doubt, and more challenging pieces to learn. But she also knew that she had the strength, skill, and determination to face whatever came next. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a companion, a teacher, and a reflection of her journey. And through it, she had found not only her talent but her courage, her confidence, and her voice. After the performance that had stunned everyone, the young girl felt a mixture of relief and excitement. She had overcome a major challenge, and though the applause and surprise from her classmates were gratifying, what mattered most was the quiet sense of achievement that she carried inside. Each day after that, she approached her practice with renewed energy, exploring pieces she had once considered too difficult, and experimenting with new styles that challenged her understanding of music. Her dedication did not go unnoticed. Teachers from other classes began to hear about her performances and would occasionally stop to watch her practice. Some of them offered small words of encouragement, while others asked her to demonstrate techniques or share tips with other students. She was shy about recognition, but she gradually began to see the value in inspiring others through her persistence and skill. Her teacher, the one who had once tried to embarrass her, now watched with a quiet respect. He continued to challenge her, as he did all students, but the tone had changed slightly. There was less expectation of failure and more acknowledgement of her potential. He would ask her to interpret pieces in her own way, offering guidance without dictating every detail. This subtle shift made her more confident and encouraged her to take ownership of her music. At school, the change in her classmates was noticeable. Those who had once whispered or doubted her dedication now approached with curiosity and respect. Some asked her to play for them during breaks. Others listened quietly as she practiced complex pieces. The young girl remained humble, focusing on her own growth rather than seeking approval. She understood that admiration was a byproduct of her hard work, not its purpose. She began to participate in small recitals organized by the school. The first few performances were nerve-wracking, but she had learned to manage her anxiety, focusing on the music rather than the audience. Each performance allowed her to explore different emotions, to experiment with dynamics and expression, and to convey stories through the piano. She noticed how the music could make people feel, how a single note or phrase could stir emotions and leave a lasting impression. This realization fueled her passion even more. At home, her practice sessions became more creative. She experimented with improvisation, adding her own touches to pieces she had learned. Sometimes she would compose short melodies, exploring ideas she had not encountered in lessons. These experiments were challenging and often frustrating, but each attempt strengthened her understanding of music and her ability to express herself. Her parents observed these changes with pride. They had always supported her, but seeing her growth in confidence, skill, and self-expression was inspiring. They offered guidance when needed, but mostly allowed her to explore her own path, understanding that true mastery and fulfillment came from internal motivation rather than external pressure. As the young girl continued to develop, she began to understand the importance of resilience and patience. Not every day brought progress. Some days were filled with mistakes and frustration. But she had learned to approach these setbacks as opportunities to learn, analyzing what went wrong and practicing with intention. Over time, she saw that persistence was more important than innate talent, and that effort and dedication could lead to remarkable improvements. The teacher began to involve her in helping other students. He would ask her to demonstrate techniques, assist classmates struggling with difficult pieces, or perform alongside others in duets. Initially, she was nervous about taking on this role, but she realized that teaching and sharing her knowledge deepened her own understanding. She also saw the positive impact she could have on others, inspiring them to work harder and believe in their abilities. In the classroom, she became a quiet leader. Her focus, dedication, and skill influenced her peers, and some of them began to emulate her practice habits. While she did not seek attention, the respect she had earned created a supportive environment where students encouraged one another. The music room, once a place of fear and criticism, had become a space of collaboration and growth. As the young girl continued to develop, she began to understand the importance of resilience and patience. Not every day brought progress. Some days were filled with mistakes and frustration. But she had learned to approach these setbacks as opportunities to learn, analyzing what went wrong and practicing with intention. Over time, she saw that persistence was more important than innate talent, and that effort and dedication could lead to remarkable improvements. The teacher began to involve her in helping other students. He would ask her to demonstrate techniques, assist classmates struggling with difficult pieces, or perform alongside others in duets. Initially, she was nervous about taking on this role, but she realized that teaching and sharing her knowledge deepened her own understanding. She also saw the positive impact she could have on others, inspiring them to work harder and believe in their abilities. In the classroom, she became a quiet leader. Her focus, dedication, and skill influenced her peers, and some of them began to emulate her practice habits. While she did not seek attention, the respect she had earned created a supportive environment where students encouraged one another. The music room, once a place of fear and criticism, had become a space of collaboration and growth. Outside of school, she started to participate in community music events. She played at small gatherings, charity events, and local competitions. Each experience was a chance to perform under pressure, to connect with different audiences, and to refine her skills further. The applause and appreciation she received were rewarding, but she remained grounded, understanding that the true reward was in the music itself and the joy it brought to others. Her confidence in performance continued to grow. She could tackle complex pieces without hesitation, interpret music in her own way, and convey emotion effectively. She noticed subtle changes in herself. Her posture became more relaxed, her breathing steadier, and her hands more agile. These small improvements reflected the countless hours of practice, the patience she had developed, and the resilience she had cultivated over time. One day, the teacher asked her to perform a piece she had been preparing for weeks in front of the entire school during an assembly. The girl felt a wave of nervousness but also excitement. She knew this was a chance to share her progress with a larger audience. When she began to play, the hall fell silent, every student and teacher captivated by the sound. The music carried the emotions she had poured into it, telling a story that resonated deeply with everyone listening. When the last note faded, the applause was overwhelming. The teacher's eyes reflected pride and recognition, a subtle but meaningful acknowledgement of her journey. Students who had once doubted her dedication now looked at her with admiration. Yet, the young girl remained composed, understanding that this moment was not the culmination but part of a continuous journey of growth and learning. Her success inspired her peers and younger students. Some began to approach her for advice on practice, while others simply listened, learning from her dedication and focus. She realized that her journey had not only been about personal growth but also about inspiring others. The impact of her persistence, resilience, and love for music extended beyond her own achievements. Back at home, she continued her rigorous practice routine. She balanced technical exercises, pieces she was learning, improvisation, and personal expression. Each day brought new challenges, new opportunities to refine her skills, and new insights into the emotional power of music. She had learned to embrace mistakes, to use criticism constructively, and to find joy in the process of learning. Through her journey, she discovered that mastery was more than skill. It was about connection, expression, and resilience. She learned to trust herself, to embrace challenges, and to let her passion guide her. The piano was not just an instrument. It was a companion, a teacher, and a reflection of her growth. As weeks turned into months, the young girl continued to excel. She performed in more events, took on more complex pieces, and developed a deep understanding of musical interpretation. Her teacher remained a strict but fair guide, helping her refine her skills while allowing her creativity to flourish. She had transformed from a nervous, shy student into a confident, skilled musician who inspired those around her. By the end of this phase of her journey, she had achieved recognition, not only for her technical ability but also for her perseverance and dedication. She understood that success was not measured solely by applause or accolades, but by personal growth, resilience, and the ability to touch others through her art. She had learned the value of hard work, the importance of patience, and the power of believing in oneself. The young girl had begun to see the broader impact of her music. It was not just a personal journey. It was a way to connect with people, to inspire, and to bring joy. She had discovered that true mastery was a combination of skill, expression, and heart. And with this understanding, she felt ready to face new challenges, confident in her abilities and committed to continuing her journey, knowing that every note played, every piece learned, and every challenge overcome was a step towards something greater. The young girl's journey reached a new height when the opportunity arose to perform at a citywide music competition. It was a prestigious event, attended by experienced musicians, teachers, and music enthusiasts. The thought of performing in front of such a large audience made her nervous, but she also felt excitement. She had worked hard for years, and this was a chance to share her music on a bigger stage, to show not only her skill, but also the emotion and dedication behind it. In the weeks leading up to the competition, she practiced with a focus that surpassed anything she had done before. Every morning, she started with scales and technical exercises to ensure her fingers were agile and precise. Afternoons were dedicated to mastering the piece she planned to perform, breaking it into sections, perfecting transitions, and emphasizing the emotional depth of each passage. Evenings were reserved for experimenting with dynamics, expression, and subtle variations that would make her performance unique. The piano had become an extension of herself, a way to communicate feelings that words could not capture. Her parents provided support and encouragement, helping her manage stress and reminding her to take care of herself. They offered words of wisdom, not just about the music, but about resilience and focus. Their belief in her abilities strengthened her confidence. She realized that the journey she had taken, through embarrassment, criticism, and relentless practice, had prepared her for this moment. The day of the competition arrived. The hall was filled with spectators, fellow participants, and judges. The young girl could feel the nervous energy in the room, the murmurs of the audience, and the anticipation in the air. When her name was called, she walked to the stage, her heart pounding but her mind focused. She sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and allowed herself a brief moment to center her thoughts. As her fingers touched the keys, the world around her seemed to fade. The music flowed naturally, each note carrying the emotion she had cultivated over years of practice. The audience was silent, captivated by the depth and precision of her performance. She moved seamlessly through difficult passages, her fingers dancing over the keys with confidence and grace. The emotions of the piece came alive, telling a story that transcended words, connecting with everyone in the room. The judges, experienced musicians themselves, watched intently. They noted her technical skill, the accuracy of each note, and the emotional depth she conveyed. What impressed them most was her ability to balance precision with expression, to play not only with her hands, but with her heart. She was no longer just a student performing a piece. She was a musician telling a story, a young artist sharing her voice with the world. When she reached the final notes, she held them with care, allowing them to linger and resonate. The hall remained silent for a brief moment, as if everyone were absorbing the beauty of the music. Then the applause erupted, filling the space with energy and appreciation. She looked up, her eyes meeting the smiles and nods of admiration from the audience, and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This was more than winning a competition. It was a validation of years of dedication, resilience, and passion. After her performance, judges approached her with praise and encouragement. They commented on her skill, her musical interpretation, and her ability to convey emotion. For the first time, she fully understood that her talent, combined with perseverance, could leave a lasting impact on others. Her teacher, who had once doubted her abilities, stood nearby, a subtle but proud smile on his face. His critical eyes now reflected respect, acknowledging the growth and transformation she had achieved. The young girl's peers were inspired as well. Students who had once been indifferent or skeptical approached her to ask questions, seek advice, or simply express admiration. She realized that her journey had become more than personal achievement. It was a source of motivation for others, showing that dedication and resilience could overcome challenges and criticism. The music she played had the power to inspire and uplift, and she felt a deep sense of responsibility and pride in that. Back at home, she reflected on her journey. She thought about the early days of fear and embarrassment, the long hours of practice in solitude, and the small victories that had built her confidence. She remembered the moments of doubt, the criticism that had stung, and the determination that had driven her forward. Every step, every challenge had contributed to her growth as a musician and as a person. Her parents celebrated with her, not just for the recognition she received, but for the dedication and resilience she had demonstrated. They reminded her that the journey itself was a triumph, that the obstacles she had overcome were as important as the accolades she earned. The young girl felt gratitude, not only for her own achievements but also for the support, encouragement, and guidance she had received along the way. In the weeks that followed, she continued to perform, teach, and explore new pieces. She experimented with different genres, composed small melodies, and encouraged younger students to pursue their own musical journeys. She understood that music was not just about personal success, but about connection, expression, and impact. Each performance, each lesson, and each practice session became an opportunity to grow, to inspire, and to share the beauty of music with others. The young girl's story became known among her school and community. People admired her talent, but they also respected her perseverance, humility, and dedication. She had transformed from a shy, nervous student into a confident, skilled musician who not only mastered the piano but also inspired those around her. The recognition she received was a reflection of her hard work, but more importantly, it was a testament to her passion, resilience, and the courage to continue despite fear and criticism. Through her journey, she learned invaluable lessons. She discovered the importance of patience, persistence, and believing in oneself. She realized that criticism could be a tool for growth rather than a source of fear. She understood that true mastery required effort, emotional investment, and a willingness to face challenges head-on. Most importantly, she learned that music was a language of the soul, a way to communicate feelings, inspire others, and leave a lasting impact. The young girl's piano mastery had shocked everyone who had doubted her, but the real triumph was internal. She had overcome fear, built confidence, and discovered her own voice through the piano. Her journey was a testament to the power of determination, practice, and resilience. She had learned that success was not only about talent, but about courage, dedication, and the ability to persevere. As she continued to play, teach, and explore new musical challenges, she carried these lessons with her. The piano remained her companion, her teacher, and her medium for expression. Every performance, every practice session, and every moment of doubt or triumph was part of a lifelong journey. She knew that her love for music, combined with determination and resilience, would continue to guide her, inspire others, and allow her to share her story through the universal language of music. The young girl's story concluded not with the applause of one performance, but with the ongoing journey of growth, passion, and inspiration. Her piano mastery had shown that even when faced with humiliation or doubt, perseverance and dedication could lead to extraordinary achievements. She had transformed fear into strength, criticism into motivation, and practice into artistry. And through it all, she had discovered not only her talent, but her courage, her confidence, and her ability to touch the hearts of others with music.